Hello, Jan.
Hello there, Sonia. How are you?
I'm good, thank you, everybody. This is Jan James. Jan is the Chief Executive of Good Egg Safety Parental Alienation UK. I need to, Jan, just briefly give a trigger warning because obviously the topic that we're going to be discussing is extremely upsetting to many people, and it is highly likely there are people who are listening to this stream right now who have been involved in one way or another in parental alienation. So I need to let you know that we're going to be discussing this right now. I don't want to upset you, but the subject is so vital that we have to discuss it, don't we, Jan?
We do.
Okay, so Jan, let's first of all tell us, what is parental alienation?
Well, the definition by Kafkas is that it's where a child resists contact with a parent in an unjustified way because of the psychological manipulation of that child by the other parent. But we feel that doesn't come close to explaining the horror of what parental alienation actually is.
I'm just looking at an infograph which was prepared by you, and it says last time the alienated. So this was from a survey that you had undertaken, and it said last time the alienated child had face-to-face contact with their parent. Almost half of our survey respondents have not seen their child for more than 6 months. 29%, 1 to 5 years, and 11%, 5 years. Jan, as a parent, that is horrendous. Absolutely horrendous.
I can't imagine, as a mum of 3 and a granny of 3, what it would be like to have that love removed from your life. I mean, it's the worst kind of abuse for a victim parent and indeed for the child, other than death.
Yes.
It is that serious.
Yes, it is that serious. Now, obviously, there's the domestic abuse bill, which is currently going through Parliament. Tell us about your problems with it and what you've been doing around it.
Well, the issue is that the problem of parental alienation has been obfuscated. The reality is that it exists. It's existed long before it was coined, the phrase parental alienation. It's been marked down since William Reich in the 1945. So parental alienation is effectively an attachment disruption with a child. So children are born with an innate need to attach to their parents. And generally that gives them a secure attachment. They need both parents to live their full life, their full potential. What parental alienation does is it causes a severance of that attachment bond, where one parent may not always be a parent, but generally the resident parent, the parent that has the most power and control, will deploy a series of very aggressive actions that serve to make it very difficult for that child to continue the relationship. And so that is really what we're looking at here. Children who have that attachment bond with the loved parent severed is the most grievous harm that you can do to a child, because children need both parents when they're both safe, affectionately available parents. The issue, in answer to your question with the domestic abuse bill, is that the way parental alienation is being positioned is only as a tool for abusive fathers to continue to victimize victim mothers. Now, I am a survivor, never thought I'd ever have to discuss it. I've had to in this space. I understand the need, the imperative to protect genuine victims of abuse and their children. I was married at 17, I was almost dead by 18, and I went to court to get supervised contact only for my late husband, who was subsequently diagnosed as a paranoid schizophrenic. So he was, unfortunately, very dangerous. I understand that need. That is not parental alienation. That is estrangement, and we do everything we can to protect children. The problem is that the domestic abuse bill, both in the House of Commons and in the House of Lords, have been sent briefing papers that say basically that parental alienation is a con and that it's a myth, it's based on pseudoscience, when in actual fact there's innumerable scientific evidence that it does exist and that it destroys both victim parents and children. And I hate to say this, but it's based on a gendered bias, because one of the main proponents of this, a falsehood, is Dr. Adrienne Barnett, where she has said on a Women's Aid website that fathers, abusers, perpetrators will diminish and demean and belittle a mother in front of them, give them expensive gifts to draw them away from contact. Basically, she cites what are alienating behaviours, and she says that it is undoubtedly a strategy of domestic abuse. What we're saying is absolutely 100% that is correct, but we need to remove the gendered lens, because the women, the mums we work with, and we work with many alienated mums and fathers, suffer the same extreme alienating behaviours. It is not a gender issue. It is a child protection issue.
Absolutely. And that's really absolutely vital. I know myself, I receive correspondence from both men and women who are dealing with parental alienation. And, I'm really glad that you're tackling this whole issue of the gender bias that is taking place, because it's only half the picture, isn't it?
It is only half the picture. And the thing is that, who are we? What kind of compassionate society are we when we disregard half our population?
Right.
I have to say, not one male victim was heard in either the House of Commons or the House of Lords. Not one male victim. There are almost 800,000 male victims. That's the equivalent of Wembley Stadium to full capacity, full of male victims, times 9. And if we disregard male victims, we therefore leave their children unprotected. And that is, as a lifetime campaigner for child safety, to me, that's unconscionable.
Absolutely. What sort of tactics are used in parental alienation?
So there are very common tactics. Amy Baker actually has 17 strategies, having worked with adults who were alienated as children. She's found out what the main tactics were, and she's produced a paper on the 17 tactics. What we've done in a new guide that we're launching next week, a survival guide for those who are suffering from this, is we've taken the main ones that are outlined on Women's Aid's own site as a strategy of domestic abuse. So the first is demeaning and diminishing, and the reason it's so abhorrent is that when you demean and diminish a parent, you effectively demean and diminish the child, because that child is half of that parent. So when you do it to one, you do it to both, and that child grows up feeling very unworthy, unloved, uncared for. It's a terrible legacy to give to a child, terrible. Obstructing contact is always the case. So telephone calls, emails, you ring on a agreed time and the child's either having tea or they're in the bath, and then when you ring back they've gone to bed. It's constant denial of contact, and each time a parent has contact helps to reaffirm their love for that child, to re-establish that nurturing bond. Many of the parents we work with had great relationships with their children right up until the point of separation, and subsequent to that it's severed.
Right. As you pointed out to me when we had a conversation, obviously prior to this, was that 1 in 6 children in England and Wales have a mental health disorder going on. This is a ticking time bomb, isn't it?
It absolutely is. That's from the NHS in 2020, October 2020. They've now cited that 1 in 6 children have a probable mental health disorder. Now, the last report that came out was the Children's Commissioner, Anne Longfield, who's the Commissioner for England, came out, I think, in 2019, and she said that they found 1 in 8 children had a mental health disorder. So this later report from the NHS is 1 in 6. But what was particularly scary was that children, younger adults, women aged 17 to 22, 27% have a probable mental health disorder. Now, they may soon be mothers. And one of the issues that drives parental alienation are mental health disorders. So it's just going to get worse if we don't get a grip on it really soon.
Yeah, it's a vicious cycle, isn't it? Because what you have are these parents who are broken from the contact with their children having been broken, and these children this is all learned behavior, isn't it? What is the long-term impact, do we know, on children who are put in this situation?
So children generally have that sense of unworthiness, because when you're told that your own parent doesn't love you, falsely told, that that parent doesn't love you, doesn't care about you, that really impacts their self-esteem. There's evidence of drug and alcohol abuse when they get older, promiscuity, because they're looking for the love that they haven't got, particularly young girls, because they've lost the daddy figure. Suicide ideation, horrendous stories that absolutely can be avoided if parental alienation is put in the domestic abuse bill, because what it then becomes is it should go under practice 12J, and it should be expedited quickly in court with a triage of experts, expert in domestic abuse and expert in the counterintuitive impact and effects and behavioural manifestations of parental alienation, so it can be quickly addressed. Because the issue here is that from first misparenting time to complete parental alienation, complete severance of that relationship, it can happen within weeks. So we have to move really quickly. And of course, trying to get a hearing at court can take far longer than that. So we need to move quickly and we need to make it a priority.
What is the problem with the family court orders being enforced? There's a very low take-up of that, isn't there?
Yes, unfortunately, what happens is a parent who is being denied contact with their own child will be forced. You know, they don't do this willingly. They spend an absolute fortune. Some of them have spent, you know, their pension, their house, their car. They've given everything to protect their children. They'll go to court to get a child arrangements order. With obsessive alienators, those are breached with impunity, sometimes from the very first, you know, scheduled parenting time. They then go back to the court to get a C79 enforcement order. It'll cost them another 215, plus the ancillary costs of legal fees. So 5,000, 10,000 if you get a barrister. These are hugely expensive, and less than 1% of those court orders are actually enforced. So the question is, why do people breach them? Because they can. There's zero accountability. Our Attorney General, when she presented her reforms to the May government in 2017, said that we need to make sure that, you know, the court orders are seen to be mandatory, because they're not an optional extra, they're mandatory, and that they are enforced. 3 breaches, transfer of residence. False allegations, you know, action taken against them, because these are huge issues. You bring a false allegation against a safe, loving parent, you wreck their reputation, you can wreck their career, you wreck their lives, none of their friends will talk to them, and you wreck that relationship, that precious, irreplaceable relationship, that parent-child bond that they have with their own children. That is criminal. Absolutely criminal.
It's so wicked when we think what it takes to raise a child, and, you know, that their basic needs need to be taken care of, because otherwise, obviously, that sets off a whole series of events, which then means they're almost walking uphill throughout the rest of their lives. And it's not just criminal, it's immoral, it's levels of cruelty when parents do that to each other. I think it's absolutely reprehensible, Jan. I really do.
It is reprehensible. Well, we have one of our parents, I mean, we've heard some horrendous stories. I mean, we ran this survey on our fairly innocuous child seat site. You know, I wanted to see how many were likely to respond, and we were inundated. We had over 2,000 responses, 1,500 in the UK. We had a leading child psychologist and a leading professor, lead academic, who interrogated the raw data. I haven't released their names because we, Good Egg Safety, have had more attacks in the last year than we've had in a lifetime. I mean, you know, this is a toxic space. It's like walking on a societal landmine. So we haven't released them, but we got these figures back, and the feedback that we got from these desperate alienated mothers, fathers, grandparents was utterly heartbreaking, really heartbreaking. One of them that we're working with, the father in this case, and it could be either gender, but in this case, the father had a very close relationship with his 2 children. He played a real key role in sharing, you know, the duties, taking the children to school, making their tea, reading the bedtime stories. When the relationship broke down, initially, his ex-wife found another partner. And so he got to see those children for 6 years following their separation and divorce. Subsequently, her relationship broke down and he met his now wife. And suddenly the whole dynamic changed. She started to, avoid contact. He couldn't speak to them on the phone. He went to court to regulate the order. The court got psychologists involved and they said that alienation was at play. And so what she did was go to a domestic abuse organization and claimed that he was an abuser. And what they did, without any reference to either the police or social workers, is they went to the house and installed a panic button and taught the children how to run and hide.
Oh my
They
goodness.
even went to the children's school, without any reference to other agencies, allowed them in and taught the children how to run and hide if they saw their father. Now, it took a lot of court action, and eventually the sheriff, because this was in Scotland, wrote to the children, insisting they came to the court to sign to say they'd seen it, to say your father is not abusive. I hope you find it in your hearts to re-establish a relationship with him. Guess what? They're unable to, because the fear of God has been put into them and they are terrified of him. And when you instill false memories of abuse, it is no different to actually doing the abuse, because the child cannot differentiate between the two. It still can create complex post-traumatic stress disorder. That is an outrage. And this isn't uncommon. What are we doing? That we're not protecting children and we're not protecting alienated parents. It is the biggest scandal we've ever come across.
It is actually, and the thing is, it's not talked about a great deal in the media, is it? I mean, do you, as somebody who's sort of making this your lifelong course, and I'm well aware that you've gone all out. I mean, you took out an overdraft just to build your website, didn't you? Right?
We're unfunded. Yes. We're working for free. The thing is, actually, I'm nearing retirement. We've built up a strong track record. We've won global awards. We've run lots of different campaigns. Child Seat with the lead agency, domestic abuse, we've run campaigns on, which this undoubtedly fits into. Lots of different campaigns. I wasn't really planning to rock the boat. I was just imagining, but having been introduced to alienation, watched it myself fairly closely, not my own children, not linked to me, but watched it for 7 years and seen the horror of a child literally being emotionally decimated, and then seeing that child go literally collapse, saying that their dad thought that they were ruining their life when their father actually loved them with all his heart. I just thought we have to do something, because when you come across these things, if you know it and you do nothing, you're complicit.
Absolutely.
And so, we're working unfunded. We've worked unfunded for 2 years. And my neck's on the chopping block. My reputation is on the chopping block. And my brand that I've spent 20 years building up is, I've got the head above the parapet. But you know what? Children's safety takes priority over every other sensibility.
I couldn't agree more. I mean,
it may not be politically expedient to stick your head above the parapet, but we need people to do that. People like Philip Davies, people like Baroness Mayer.
Now, yes, exactly. You did mention Baroness Mayer to me, didn't you? Tell us about Baroness Mayer.
Well, Baroness Mayer had her own children abducted. I think they were the age of 11 and taken to Germany. That's where she met her husband, actually, Sir Christopher Mayer, to try and recover them. She set up a brilliant charity, worked with many other cases of abduction. Cecilia is one of them, which she's done a documentary on, where the child, her children, and Cecile was abducted by her father in this case, taken away from her mother, taken to a different country, and she now traces back her life. She's met her mother now, her father's dead, and she talks about the impact that had on her life. Extreme anxiety, low self-esteem, depression, insomnia, this whole raft of awful legacy that an abducted child would get. And the thing is that Baroness Mayer understands parental alienation, because parental alienation is child abduction. The only difference is that the child isn't in a different country, they're just round the corner. But they may as well be in a different country, because you cannot get to them. Police will not get involved, schools will not get involved, and the courts are not acting on it. So it is a terrible place for parents to be.
Terrible. In whose interest could it possibly be for our establishment to deny the existence of parental alienation?
I, I'm going to have to say this. This is a gendered issue. As a campaigner, I spend a lot of time making sure I understand what is the real problem here. And we dig and dig and dig and dig and dig until we get to the real problem. Because if we don't get the real problem, my team can write award-winning ads, which they've done, that addresses the right solution to the wrong problem, which means it's destined for failure. And what we're looking at here is not parental alienation as the problem. It's a much bigger issue. It's the issue that basically denies the fact that abuse happens to men, the big focus on women and girls to the exclusion of men and boys. It's a feminist agenda. I have to say it, and I am a feminist. I'm an equity feminist. I march behind any banner that proclaims equal rights, equal opportunity. This is not that. This is what possibly used to be sort of liberal left many years ago has now become mainstream. And what's happened is you've got what was the kernel of truth. Some fathers may indeed be abusive to their wives and use parental alienation as a counterclaim. Nobody would argue against that because people can and do lie. But what they've done is distorted it, saying only fathers do that, amplified it and repeated it. And it's been repeated so often, it is now embedded as truth.
Oh, goodness.
But it doesn't matter how many times you say a falsehood, it is still false.
Yes.
So we need to remove the gendered lens and look at the reality. Then we can actually address the issue and save tens of thousands of parents, and particularly children. 125,000 are going through CAFCAS now in contested court hearings. We have to get a grip on this right now. Otherwise, we will have failed them. And that is unconscionable.
Absolutely, Jan. How can people find you and support what you're doing, Jan?
Thank you. We've set up a website, which we got the overdraft for, which is parentalalienation.uk.info. We're on Facebook and Twitter. Our handle is at PAlienationUK. And we've got our own information on there. And we're launching, as I say, a new survival guide for parents to show them what it is, what it looks like, what are the signs, how can you get an early warning, how can you look after yourself when you're going through the worst abuse that any parent can go through, what to do if you go to court, all the things that I think every parent needs to know at the very beginning of their journey, because we're pulling bodies out at the end of, at the bottom of the river when we need to be addressing it at the front end. And I really hope that our House of Lords will take another look at this and talk to alienated mothers, alienated fathers, and particularly child survivors of alienation. If they just do that, then they'll be able to make an informed choice and ensure this is included within our domestic abuse bill. If it's not included, it will have failed all of them.
Oh, goodness. Not even bear thinking about it, really. Jan, anything else we need to know on this?
I don't think so. I think I probably covered it, hopefully, unless you've got more questions.
No, I think you've covered it brilliant, really. I mean, the point being is that this is an absolute scandal. It's, it seems to be silent. It seems to have gone under the radar in many respects. It's dismissed. It's called something else. But you and I are seeing the fallout of this, of broken parents, broken children. I'm also in contact with adults who have been subject to parental alienation themselves. They're broken, Jan, absolutely broken. I don't need to tell you this. So I thank you greatly for coming on and, informing us about it. I know it's a painful topic and I know it means the world to you, but I hope that your campaign succeeds, Jan, because it definitely deserves to.
Well, thank you so much for saying that. And I've got to say, I'm great. My life is good. But these parents inspire me daily. They really do. Their bravery, their courage, the support that they give us when they're facing the biggest battle of their lives inspires me. If we can change the law for them and for their children, then it's a job well done. And it's a privilege to be able to lend our platform to do that.
Brilliant. Jan, thank you so much for joining us this evening. Everybody, Jan James, Good Egg Safety, Parental Alienation UK, fighting the good fight for children and families everywhere. Take care of yourself, Jan.
Thank you. You too.
Thank you. Thanks. Bye.
Bye-bye.